All right, sweetheart. Who's this man to you?
He's my dad.
Is he making you say that?
No.
Sir, I'm gonna need proof she's your daughter. Birth certificate, custody paper, something.
Officer, we're just sitting in the park.
ID. Now.
The officer thought he was stopping a suspicious situation in a public park. A black father sitting with his young daughter suddenly became the target of aggressive questioning and immediate suspicion. What the officer didn't realize was that the man he was threatening to detain was a respected judge. In the minutes that followed, that mistake would trigger an investigation, a lawsuit worth $1.1 million, and consequences that would change the officer's career. Marcus Williams was 47 years old, a respected federal judge who had served on the United States District Court for nearly 8 years. Before his appointment to the bench, he spent more than 15 years as a civil rights attorney, arguing dozens of cases involving constitutional law and police accountability. A graduate of Howard University School of Law, Williams had built a reputation for fairness, careful reasoning, and strict adherence to the rule of law. In his courtroom, he was known for demanding evidence, protecting due process, and reminding officers that the law applies to everyone. Officer Daniel Harper, 39, had been with the city police department for 12 years and was assigned to patrol in the district that included the park. According to internal records later obtained by investigators, Harper had accumulated 7 citizen complaints over the course of his career, including allegations of unnecessary stops, aggressive conduct, and racial profiling. None of those complaints resulted in suspension or termination. Most were closed as unfounded or insufficient evidence. Like many officers protected by internal review systems at police union procedures, Harper remained on active patrol despite a documented pattern of confrontational encounters with civilians. Marcus Williams was sitting on a wooden bench near the playground area of Riverside Park. His 7-year-old daughter was beside him, holding a small cup of ice cream. The afternoon was calm. Families were walking dogs, children were playing on the swings, and a few parents were gathered nearby watching their kids. Officer Daniel Harper approached from the paved path. His patrol vehicle had stopped near the park entrance moments earlier after someone called the police reporting a suspicious situation. The caller had described a black man sitting with a young white child. Harper walked directly toward the bench without greeting the man. His hand rested near his duty belt. His body language was rigid and confrontational from the start. He stopped the steps in front of Marcus. "Sir, stay right there," Harper said sharply. Marcus looked up, confused but calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" Instead of answering the man, Harper turned to the child. "All right, sweetheart, who's this man to you?" "He's my dad." Harper leaned slightly closer to the girl. "Is he making you say that?" "No." The officer's tone hardened. His posture became more aggressive. Several people nearby began to notice the confrontation. "Sir, I'm going to need proof she's your daughter. Birth certificate, custody papers, something." Marcus kept his voice steady. "Officer, we're just sitting in the park." Harper took a step closer. "ID, now." The interaction was immediately shaped by suspicion directed only at Marcus. No other parents sitting with their children in the park were approached or questioned. The assumption of wrongdoing appeared to be based entirely on the racial difference between the father and the child. Marcus slowly reached for his wallet. "I'm getting my ID. Keep your hands where I can see them," Harper snapped. The officer's hand briefly hovered near his holster as Marcus pulled the wallet from his pocket. Several bystanders were now watching closely. The child looked nervous and moved closer to her father. Marcus handed over his driver's license. Harper looked at it quickly, but did not soften his posture. "This doesn't prove anything," the officer said. Marcus responded calmly. "She's my daughter. We come here all the time." Harper shook his head. "I'm not taking your word for it." The officer turned slightly and spoke into his radio, requesting identification verification. While waiting for dispatch, he remained standing directly over Marcus, blocking his movement away from the bench. The child looked up at her father. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Marcus answered quietly. "No, sweetheart." The officer interrupted again. "Sir, until I verify this situation, you're being detained." Marcus looked directly at him. "Detained? For sitting with my daughter?" Harper's voice grew louder. "You fit the description of a suspicious individual reported by a caller. The description provided to police was simple: a black man with a white child. That alone had triggered the stop. No report of a crime, No report of distress from the child. No evidence of danger. Yet the officer continued escalating. Stand up. Marcus stood slowly. Turn around. Officer, this is unnecessary. Turn around. The tone of the interaction made it clear that the officer had already assumed wrongdoing. The presumption was immediate. The suspicion was automatic. And the only visible factor distinguishing Marcus from every other parent in the park was the color of his skin. Several people nearby began recording with their phones. A woman standing near the playground spoke quietly to another parent. He's just sitting with his kid. The officer ignored the crowd and continued focusing on Marcus until you can prove that child belongs with you. You're being detained. Marcus remained calm, but the humiliation was visible. He stood in the middle of a public park, surrounded by strangers, being treated as a potential criminal simply for sitting with his daughter. The officer still had not asked the child her name. He had not asked where they lived. He had not asked any normal questions a parent would answer easily. Instead, the first assumption was suspicion. The first response was force. And the reason for that assumption was becoming obvious to everyone watching. Marcus Williams was being treated as a threat before he had done anything at all. Officer Daniel Harper stood behind Marcus Williams and ordered him to place his hands behind his back. The command was loud enough for people across the playground to hear. Parents who had been watching quietly now moved closer. Marcus turned slightly. Officer, I'm not resisting. But this is unnecessary. Harper did not respond to the statement. Instead, he repeated the command. Hands behind your back. Marcus complied slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. His daughter stood only a few feet away, watching the scene unfold. Daddy, what's happening? It's okay, Marcus told her calmly. The officer placed handcuffs around Marcus's wrists. The metal clicked loudly. The sound carried across the park. Several people nearby began speaking at once. Why are you arresting him? A woman asked. He was just sitting there, another man said. One parent stepped forward slightly. That's his kid. I see them here all the time. Harper ignored the comments. Step back, he told the group. The crowd did not move immediately. People were now openly recording the encounter on their phones. The situation had become clear to everyone watching. The officer had approached a black father sitting peacefully with his child and had escalated the encounter into a detention without any visible evidence of wrongdoing. Marcus spoke again, still controlled. Officer, you've asked for ID. I gave it to you. That doesn't confirm custody. Harper replied. You haven't asked her name. You haven't asked where we live. You haven't asked a single question that would verify anything. Harper tightened his grip on Marcus's arm. You're being detained until we figure this out. A man standing near the playground shook his head. This is ridiculous. You're doing this because he's black. The officer turned toward the bystanders. Stay out of police business. The comment triggered louder reactions from the crowd. He hasn't done anything. You're harassing him. A woman holding a phone spoke directly while filming. This is exactly what people talk about. A black father can't sit with his kid without being treated like a criminal. The officer again ignored the remarks and focused on Marcus. Do you have documentation proving she belongs with you? Marcus answered quietly. She's my daughter. That's not documentation. Another bystander spoke up. You didn't ask anyone else? In this park for paperwork, only him. The observation reflected what everyone could already see. There were other parents sitting on benches nearby with their children. None of them had been approached. None had been questioned. None had been asked to produce legal documents proving they were parents. Marcus stood in handcuffs while the officer continued to question him. You fit the description of a suspicious person. What description? Marcus asked. Black male with a white child. Someone in the crowd repeated loudly. Several people reacted immediately. That's not a crime. That's racism. The moment was no longer ambiguous. The justification for the stop had been stated out loud. The only factor that triggered suspicion was race. Marcus remained composed, but his voice carried a clear frustration. So the crime is sitting with my daughter while being black. The officer said nothing in response. Instead, he guided Marcus toward the patrol car parked near the path. The handcuffs remained tight around his wrists. The child stood frozen near the bench. Daddy, a woman from the crowd stepped closer to her. It's okay, honey, she said softly. The officer opened the rear door of the patrol vehicle. Marcus looked back toward the park. This is exactly the problem, he said firmly. A black father cannot sit in public with his own child without being treated like a suspect. Several bystanders nodded. One man spoke loudly so the officer could hear him. This isn't the first time that officer has done this. Another voice followed. He's always stopping black people around here. A third person added while recording. Everyone in this neighborhood knows about him. Those comments were not speculation. In the months that followed, internal records would show that Officer Harper had already accumulated multiple complaints involving aggressive stops of black residents in the same district. Several reports described the same pattern, approaching without evidence, assuming criminal activity, escalating quickly to detention. But in that moment, standing in the park, the officer ignored everything being said. He closed the patrol car door with Marcus inside. The bystanders continued recording, and the reason for the detention had already been spoken clearly in front of everyone. A black father had been treated as a criminal simply because someone believed he did not belong with his own child. Marcus Williams sat in the back seat of the patrol car, while Officer Daniel Harper stood outside speaking into his radio. The situation had already drawn attention. Several bystanders were still recording. One of the videos was uploaded online within minutes. Inside the patrol vehicle, Marcus remained calm. His hands were still cuffed behind his back. At the precinct, the stop was logged as a possible custodial verification involving a suspicious adult male. The description again relied on the same detail, a black man with a white child. The case moved quickly through the internal reporting system because multiple patrol officers had responded to the radio call. A supervising lieutenant reviewed the initial dispatch notes. "Wait," the lieutenant said while reading the report. "What exactly was the cause for detention?" The responding officer answered. Caller reported a suspicious situation in the park. Adult black male with a white child. The lieutenant looked up. "That's the entire basis?" The room became quiet. Meanwhile, one of the officers ran Marcus Williams' identification through the system again. The record appeared immediately. The officer stared at the screen for a moment. "Lieutenant, you need to see this." The supervisor stepped closer. "What is it?" "That man in the patrol car." "Yes, he's a federal judge." The lieutenant leaned forward and read the screen. "Marcus Williams, United States District Court active federal judge." The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. "You're telling me Officer Harper detained a sitting federal judge?" the lieutenant asked. "That's what the system says." The lieutenant immediately picked up the radio. "Unit in Riverside Park, confirm the identity of the individual detained." Harper responded. "Adult male, Marcus Williams." The lieutenant spoke again, slower this time. "Officer Harper, do you understand that Marcus Williams is a federal judge?" There was a pause on the radio. "Negative. I was verifying custody." The lieutenant's voice hardened. "You detained a federal judge because he was sitting with his child in a park." Harper responded defensively. The caller said it looked suspicious. The lieutenant replied immediately, "Suspicious how?" Silence followed. Everyone in the room understood the implication. The only reason the situation had been reported and escalated was the racial difference between the father and the child. At the same time, supervisors began reviewing the bodycam feed transmitted from Harper's unit. The footage showed the entire encounter, the questioning of the child, the refusal to accept identification, the handcuffing of a man who had done nothing except sit with his daughter. One supervisor pointed at the screen. He asked the girl if she was being forced to say he's her father. Another officer shook his head, and he never asked the child her name. A third officer added quietly, "This stop was based on race." The lieutenant made another call, this time directly to the department's legal liaison. "We have a serious problem," he said. Within minutes, the order was issued. "Officer Harper, remove the handcuffs immediately." Harper responded, "Lieutenant, remove the handcuffs now." At the park, Harper opened the patrol car door. Marcus looked up calmly. "You're releasing me." The officer unlocked the cuffs. "You're free to go." Marcus stepped out slowly and looked directly at him. "You detained me because I'm a black man sitting with my daughter." Harper did not respond. By now the park was filled with people watching. Phones were still recording. One woman said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "You treated him like a criminal because he's black." Another man added, "That officer does this all the time." The pattern was already being discussed openly in front of witnesses. Residents in the neighborhood had seen similar stops before. Black residents questioned without cause. Black drivers pulled over without explanation. Black fathers treated as suspects in ordinary situations. Back inside the precinct, supervisors were already documenting the situation as a potential liability case. A captain spoke directly to the lieutenant. "This is going to trigger an investigation. Internal affairs," the lieutenant asked. "A legal review," the captain replied. The issue was no longer just an individual stop. It was a departmental failure. An officer had detained a citizen without evidence of a crime based entirely on racial suspicion in front of witnesses and cameras. And the citizen he detained was not just any resident. It was a federal judge. The consequences would not be handled quietly. The video was already spreading online, and the department now understood that the incident had become a legal and institutional crisis. Within days of the incident, the video recorded by witnesses spread across social media and local news broadcasts. The footage showed the entire sequence: a black father questioned without cause, handcuffed in front of his daughter, and treated as a suspect simply for sitting in a public park. Civil rights attorneys quickly became involved. Marcus Williams filed a formal complaint and later initiated a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city and the police department. The claim alleged unlawful detention, racial profiling, violation of constitutional rights, and emotional harm to both him and his child. During the early stages of the legal process, the department attempted to justify the stop by pointing to the initial emergency call. The officer responded to a report of suspicious activity, a department spokesperson stated, but the explanation collapsed under scrutiny. The original call transcript revealed that the only description provided to dispatch was simple: a black man sitting with a white child in the park. No report of distress, no report of a crime, no report that the child appeared in danger. The suspicion was based entirely on race. Attorneys representing Williams addressed the issue directly during a press briefing. "This case is not complicated," one lawyer said. "A black father was treated like a kidnapper because someone believed he didn't belong with his own child." As the lawsuit progressed, discovery uncovered internal records about Officer Daniel Harper. Those records revealed a troubling pattern. Over 12 years on the force, Harper had accumulated 7 citizen complaints. Several described aggressive stops involving black residents. 2 complaints specifically alleged racial profiling during pedestrian stops in the same district. One internal memo described his approach as confrontational escalation during low-risk encounters. None of those complaints had resulted in serious discipline. Most were dismissed with the same language: insufficient evidence. During a deposition, one attorney asked the department supervisor directly, "How many complaints does an officer need?" Before intervention occurs, the supervisor hesitated. "There is no specific number." The exchange became widely reported. It reinforced what many residents already believed: complaints were recorded, but rarely acted upon. Meanwhile, witness videos from the park continued circulating online. In one clip, a bystander can be heard speaking directly to the officer during the arrest. "You're doing this because he's black." The officer does not respond. Another witness says clearly, "That's his daughter. He's here all the time." The footage showed that the objections from the public were immediate and clear. People watching understood the injustice in real time. Several parents who had been present in the park later gave sworn statements describing the same observation. There were other parents sitting with their kids. One witness testified, "Only the black father was treated like a suspect." As pressure mounted, the city initiated an internal investigation through the department's professional standards division. Bodycam footage, dispatch recordings, and complaint histories were reviewed. The conclusion was direct: the detention lacked probable cause. The officer had escalated the encounter based on an assumption that had no factual basis, and that assumption had been triggered by race. Facing the strength of the evidence and the public attention surrounding the case, city attorneys moved toward settlement negotiations rather than continuing the legal fight in court. Several months later, the city council approved a financial settlement totaling $1.1 million. $700,000 were allocated as compensation to Marcus Williams for unlawful detention, reputational harm, and violation of civil rights. $300,000 were designated for damages related to the emotional distress caused to his daughter, who had witnessed her father being handcuffed in front of her. The remaining $100,000 covered legal fees and case costs. At the public meeting where the settlement was announced, one council member addressed the issue bluntly. A man was treated like a criminal because he was a black father with a white child. That cannot happen in a city that claims to respect equal protection under the law. The police department also announced disciplinary action. Officer Daniel Harper was removed from patrol duties during the investigation and later terminated for violations of departmental conduct policies related to unlawful detention and discriminatory enforcement. In addition to the individual discipline, the department announced several policy reforms. Officers would be required to undergo additional training on bias recognition and lawful detention standards. Supervisors were instructed to review repeated citizen complaints more aggressively when patterns appeared, but for many residents, the reforms came after years of similar incidents. At a community meeting held weeks after the settlement, one resident summarized the broader issue. This didn't happen because the officer made one mistake. It happened because the system allowed the same behavior over and over. The case became a widely cited example of racial profiling during routine police encounters. It demonstrated how quickly suspicion could escalate into detention when bias replaced evidence, and it left a clear public record of what had occurred in that park. A black father sitting with his daughter had been treated as a criminal, not because of anything he did, but because someone believed he didn't belong there. This story is meant to generate awareness. It proves that a simple moment in a public park can quickly turn into a humiliating and dangerous situation when suspicion is driven by racial bias. Instead of evidence, a father sitting peacefully with his child became a suspect in seconds, not because of anything he did, but because of how he looked. In 2025, Black Americans were nearly 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. And 77% of black adults say they are treated less fairly by police than white people. So ask yourself some difficult questions. How many similar encounters never get recorded? How many fathers, brothers, or sons are treated as suspects simply for existing in public spaces? How many officers continue patterns of behavior that departments already know about? When bias replaces evidence, ordinary people pay the price. Do you know any organizations that work to protect the rights of black people in America? Legal support groups, community safety organizations, or civil rights coalitions? Share them in the comments. Let's support the people who are working every day to defend justice and accountability. What do you think should happen in situations like this? Should officers face stronger consequences when racial profiling is proven? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters in conversations like this. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.